So murder in the Western Cape increased 9.1% in recent crime statistics. 75% of murders in Cape Town occur in the Cape Flat areas, many linked to gang violence. Over 90% of South Africa's gang-related murders occur in the Western Cape. Firearms are used in more than 60% of these murders. Let's paint a picture for the South Africans. How brutal is it really?
So to give you an idea nationally first, we have about almost 3 murders per hour in the country. So while you and I are sitting here, 3 people will be killed. More or less 71 murders per day. The stats that were released for the end of 2025 indicated that only 257 out of the 1,187 murders in a quarter in the Western Cape were actually gang-related. It's about 22%, which makes no sense at all, because according to us, over 70% is gang-related, and that murder specific in the Western Cape is heavily concentrated in gang-related, call it gang-related areas or gang-ridden areas. When we look at the broader Cape Flats, we record anywhere between 35 and 50 murders per week. As you correctly said, between 50 and 60%, I think the latest for the Western Cape was 54%, was committed with illicit firearms. To give you an idea of the kind of numbers that from basically a City of Cape Town Metro point of view, the Metro Police alone and local law enforcement confiscate firearms at, that will give you an idea of how heavily armed some of these people are. Now, October 2025 until January of 2026, the city enforcement agencies confiscated 117 firearms. That's just the city. The conviction rate for those guns that were confiscated is less than 1%. So that means that people with illicit firearms in the city of Cape Town are not prosecuted and convicted by national government, and they're not sufficiently investigated in order to ensure that prosecution can be successful. This whole crisis is fed with the drug trade, okay, illicit drugs. Take, for example, whatever else they find that they can use or sell. Now, just the city, again, city enforcement agencies made 4,611 arrests, and they seized 16,424 units of drugs. In the large majority, once again, of those cases, less than 5% conviction rate. So now you've got this huge drug crisis, you've got a huge illicit firearm crisis, and you've got the crimes being committed in between with that. The process at the moment, how it is working, is that if Joe Emilio is a Metro Police officer and he arrests Ian Cameron tonight and he seizes 2 illicit firearms with some narcotics of some kind, etc., you basically hand Ian over to the South African Police Service, which is a national government institution controlled by national government, from where a detective is allocated that specific case. So Joe has little or nothing to do with it, unless Joe might have to later go and testify in court. Obviously, you'll give a statement, etc. But in essence, you've done most of your job, the way things are set up at the moment. From there, that detective needs to complete his or her investigation, from where they go to a prosecutor, and they determine whether they can prosecute the case or not. Well, that's where the crisis usually happens, because either the prosecutor says the investigation isn't fit for prosecution, or the prosecutor, him or herself, are not good enough for that job or not interested, or whatever the case might be. It's not to criticize alone prosecutors or just detectives. There are many dynamics in between that could influence that. The point is just a case like that is often either struck off the roll, withdrawn, and eventually the criminal ends up being released and they go back to what they're doing once again. And this is what Metro has done, in my opinion, and I actually come across like a marketing agent when I say it that way, but they've been brilliant in continuously following up on cases. But despite that, they don't have the power to do more. They don't have the legislative power to do more. It's the same with, like, for example, now that the SANDF is deploying in gang-ridden areas, they can do nothing more than just support the police. So they can arrest like any civilian can arrest, and they can act upon an instruction of a South African Police Service member. Legislation allows for that. But in essence, they are still not police members. So They can't do more. Now, the difference, I guess, to a certain extent, is that Metro, law enforcement, traffic, etc., they do have more arresting powers. They are official peace officers. They can use a blue light and so on and so forth, but they can't detain anyone. So for all practical purposes, they are simply crime prevention members. That's what they're mainly focused on. Now, my question to the acting minister as well as the president, and I asked this to them after the State of the Nation address, is why would you not expand policing powers? Why would you not, for example, go to the city of Cape Town? They are competent to get the job done. You say to them, okay, we don't want to give you all the investigative powers yet, for whatever reason it might be, but we want to make sure that you are able to investigate, for example, gang-related gun offenses. You can do everything, including processing the scene. We share information with each other, and you can present that docket to the prosecutor to consider prosecution. Immediately, they would be the ultimate force multiplier to the South African Police Service, who are already significantly understaffed in the province, who are already bringing in ex-detectives, which I think is a great thing to do. I think they pulled in another 62 veteran detectives this week that have now started in the province, and I think that's great for mentoring, etc. But the question I keep asking is, why wouldn't you expand power to competent local and provincial authorities? It doesn't make sense to me anymore. The rate at which the bloodshed continues, and they keep trying to beat the problem with the same broken strategy, just doesn't make sense. Something's got to give. So we must ask, is it about politics or is it about the people? Because if it's about the people, they could have expanded police powers already. I think that sometimes it's better not to ask permission. I think it's something that the city has done extremely well with parts of Metro Police. If you look at the way that they've gone above and beyond doing Metro Police and by law enforcement, I think this is fantastic because it creates healthy competition between SAPS and Metro, which I think is a very good thing. The one keeps an eye on the other, they keep each other in check, and it immediately escalates the way, how serious the different agencies take their jobs. Unfortunately, many municipalities in the Western Cape too, they haven't made the mind shift yet that they can't just focus on bylaw enforcement. I often hear, whether from politicians or officials at these municipalities, I often hear, no, but SAPS does crime prevention. SAPS needs to. I'm like, listen, if you haven't caught on by now, it might be time to wake up, because you're in for a very rude awakening. And on the other, the fight around lifestyle audits, who does them, how regularly they're done, polygraphing, integrity testing in general, needs to run. And it's not a once-off. It's something that, for example, if you're in the top 50 of SAPS, in my opinion, you should be polygraphed 4 times a year, if not more. And we need to clean up that way. And if there's any doubt or any indication of wrongdoing, you're not just suspended, you're removed.